Rahman Rahim. I'm happy that one more time I have the opportunity to be with dear brothers and sisters of Ahlul Bayt Islamic Society of New England and Zek MIT Shia Muslim Association. As Dr. Musallai said, this is the sixth lecture final lecture of our series, mini-series, Qur'an and Yemen. The focus will be the third surah, which we will discuss, Surah Quraysh, the 106th surah of Qur'an. And as Dr. Masalai said, first I mentioned the occasions. We had the Eid al-Ghadir last Saturday, so I congratulate everybody, Eid al-Ghadir. But also we have the sad occasion of the aggression and war in the Middle East. And we hope for prayer, and we pray for the peace and justice and in the Middle East for everybody, for every country, every people. As you know, we discussed last lecture. This is a mini series we were discussing, and kind of the idea was that the abstract Middle lecture series, we will explore chapters and verses of the Quran that are in various ways connected to Southern Arabia. And we define Southern Arabia a little bit broader, which includes present-day Yemen, Oman, specifically the ancient kingdoms of Himyar, Saba, and Azaramot, as well Ethiopia, East Africa, historically known as Habasha. The first three lectures, even more, the first four lectures, we focused on Surah Al-Buruj, but also we covered the history, the connected history of these two regions. These two regions are very much connected. And then last lecture, we discussed Surah 105 and Field, Elephant, and Abraha. Today we are going to discuss Surah 106, which is Quraysh, the tribe of the Prophet, and these two surahs, 105 and 106, are connected. There could be other topics, calculated verses of Quran, which inshallah later on we'll discuss, and even the previous topics could have some additions. And even today's topic, actually today's topic could be expanded if you want. But our aim is has been to gain a deeper understanding of the meaning and significance of these surahs and verses by examining the religious, political, social, cultural context, as well the historical events of the pre-Islamic Southern Arabia. And so today we are discussing Surah 106, so I will recite it. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم لإيلاف قريش إيلافهم رحلة الشتاء والصيف فليعبدوا رب هذا البيت الذي أطعمهم من جوع وآمنهم من خوف. So look, if you recite the meaning, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, then in gratitude is technically not there, for solidarity among the Quraysh. So this concept of Ilaf, we have to look what exactly is. Yeah, here we have maybe three words, I mean, technically Quraysh, but okay, Quraysh, we think we are familiar, but Ilaf and Rehla, these are the crucial words of the surah. And then, so reciting the meaning is that for solidarity among the Quraysh, the solidarity during winter and summer journeys. So they're talking about two journeys, one in winter and summer, and they have some solidarity, some contract, some way of doing it. Let them worship the Lord of this house, which this house means Kaaba. So in Mecca, so also we were in the Hajj season, so this is also related to that. Who has fed them and saved them, means the Qurayshis, from hunger and secured them from fear. So this is even the hadith we have is one of the honors of Quraysh, which the surah in Quran is revealed in for them. So we are I'm going to go to the traditional commentary, so maybe I go to let me stop sharing and then find the screen, and then we'll start. And then so we go to, and as usual, I've done in these surahs, I prefer we see the traditional commentary. I would do with the Al-Mizan, which is actually more true, and then a little bit study Quran. Dr. Nasr, and then we go some complementary discussions. So let me share with you screen. So as Allah says, okay, one of the surah, as we said, is Makki, clearly early surah, 4 verses. And we said, as it was clearly, actually the meaning was clear, and then we'll see it speaks about God favor about Quraysh tribe with respect to 2 annual journeys. And then the main message was to kind of worshiping God and serving the Lord of this house, So the main message was in this verse, فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ, the verse 3. I mean, and God brings them some favor to them, some blessing, some ni'mah to them, but then tell them, okay, I did this blessing for you, this ni'mah for you. Worship me, worship which I'm the God or the Lord of this house. And then again, the surah is kind of moral argument. Look, that okay, we have done this blessed favor to you. This is kind of fitra. When somebody does something good to us, we naturally consider ourselves indebted. Although we are indebted to God because of His creation and many other blessings, but this was specifically meant to Quraysh. Now, one of the discussion, which is classical Islamic commentators take their time to discuss it, is the connection of these two surahs. 105, 106, 105 was elephant, 106 Quraysh, which we're discussing, whether they were 2 surah or 1 surah. I mean, this is odd, but they have some narrations. Somebody says, for example, Qusayy ibn Kilab in his manuscript put these 2 surahs back to back, but there was no Bismillah between them, so make them 1 surah. And then there are strange things associated with Qusayy ibn Kilab. Sometimes they tell him he didn't have. I mean, I think this was the type of guy which anybody have some idea, put it in his manuscript. I don't know. We discussed about in the cap before that maybe the last 2 surah of Quran, Ma'uzatain, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, Qul a'udhu bi rabbil falaq, it wasn't his manuscript. But people have discussed it. It wasn't maybe big deal if it was only Sunni textbooks. But Allama says this is mainstream view among Shias too. So let's read it because still I want to. We are still. I'm interested in history, but I'm more interested in maybe I want to discuss history, but also this is Tafsir Quran foremost, and this is traditional point. Still, we should be ever. So since the content of surah somewhat relates to this surah, 106, related to Surah Al-Fil, some Sunni scholars have held that 2 of them actually compose a single chapter, just as said in the surah-The and surah-Al-Inshirah. Okay, they say the same thing about surah-The and Inshirah 93 and 94, and based on the connection between them. The fact they are connected is true, but there are 2 surahs. Now, Allah said Sunnis think like that, but then this is also held to be the mainstream view among Shias, which is wrong. I mean, and then he's saying, however, the evidence put forward for this view does not suffice to prove it. He put it very mildly, politically correctly, but because default is there are 2 surahs, you have to go forward to say there are 1 surah. And then Allah discusses one of them, as I said, is related to manuscript of Qusayy ibn Kilab. One other one was that how Omar recited it. And then all of these are, they're not accurate. You can punch on them. Maybe the guy doesn't refer it correctly. And Allah went to the Shia hadiths. I mean, I don't know. I mean, we can discuss it in detail, but at the end, reject them, So, and one of the arguments he used is actually one of the hadiths from Prophet Muhammad. Before even going to discussion with Shini, from the Sunnis, it is in their textbook that Prophet Muhammad, at least is ascribed to him, listed 7 favors to the Quraysh, and among them was 1 surah was revealed to them, for them. And then the narrations about Shia narrations, you look and how this may be that or that. The only final conclusion is this. It is not that there is one, actually, some of those hadiths people use as arguing that these are 1 surah, actually prove there are 2 surahs. because one of them, for example, says this middle one, and Mufazzal ibn Saleh narrated from Imam Sadiq, do not recite two surahs in a single rak'ah, except Zuha and Alam Nashra and Alam Tara Kaifa and Ilaf of Quraysh. So this doesn't say there are one surah. These are explicitly says there are two surahs. And then it says you shouldn't recite in single rak'ah two surahs except in these two cases. So you see, if you are deciding to after Ham to recite Surah 93, okay, you can do 94 too. Even I don't think it says you necessarily should do. And then if you after Surah Al-Ham, you decided to recite either 105, okay, do 106, you can do 106 too, but not necessary. So Allah goes through all the hadiths and then who has narrated, what does it mean? And I think the final conclusion is this. The concept is very close. Sunni commentators, few of them, that the content is two surahs close, but there are two different surahs, and then the fact you want to recite them, you are allowed to recite them in a prayer together, side by side, one of them is another issue, but it seems you are, or there is something about their recitations. And we have heard about, there are also Surah 81, 82 now here. There are some features in there. When we were discussing the structure of Quran and chronological order, we saw there was some relation between surahs, and that's the case. But the argument I also say, and this is interesting, none of this discussion is mentioned, so maybe I have to go back to slides. Let's see. So one of the arguments they don't make is the structure of the surah. Look, the surah al-Fil has very clear structure, very different. I mean, if you believe they are the same, yeah, you cannot override it. But if you're really doubtful and you want to see whether two surahs or one surahs, I think this is powerful enough because you can see this surah Fil ends up with this rhyme, al-Fil, Tazlil, Ababil, Sejil, Makul. So there is a clear law, and most of them El, and then Ul and Il also we saw this even like rap music. Actually, this rap music has, because it's a little bit different type of rhyme, has helped these issues also become more clarified. We had some discussions when we were discussing this again about the rhyme of Quran. Look, this is completely clear rhyme you need, and it's very different structurally from this surah. Quraysh, no eel, no nothing. And even is not much rhymed. And then also the whole sedge of it is different. So these three verses are not, okay, meaning-wise are connected, but structurally are different. I mean, it is about Quraysh. That's in some sense it's about Quraysh. But these are two different surahs. I mean, these are some stuff, that you have to see that every time its own questions. And then you need every time its own commentator. I mean, the question sometimes is discussed, and people spend a lot of time to discussing it, like we have for the Qasams or for the Surah Buruj. Okay, what is Shahid and Mashhud? What is, and then 20 different versions. And then you see these questions are not questions over time. Sometimes questions seem silly. And then one even guy said, sometimes progress in science happens not to answering a question yes or no, but to putting the whole question aside. And you don't feel the question is so meaningful or important or relevant. But anyway, this discussion is there. No, there are two surahs, two different surahs, but they're somewhat related conceptually. Then whether you can or you want to recite them in both together back to back. In Rakka is okay, but definitely you have to say the Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Each have his own Bismillah. Okay, so let's go back to our back where we were. So this was one topic. Now let's go really to the verses. So after Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, we have Ilaf of Quraysh, Ilaf of Shita was safe for harmonizing agreement, compact. So this Ilaf, from Aleph, and then from Ulfa comes from the, some bounding happen. When you're close to somebody, an animal, for example, you raise it, you have some binding. So here, different translators use different words, but we'll see the meaning for the Quraysh, propitiating. This is them in winter and journeys, summer journeys, Rehma. So then Allah discuss according to Raghib. Raghib is one of the most important work of philology, history, Islamic civilization. So is always referred elf, as uh, means the root, a trilateral roof of Ilaf, gathering with harmony. One of its derivative is ulfa, the one I said behind Farsi. So affinity, intimacy, familiarity, some bonding has happened, so that's it. So this was a contract, a unity between Quraysh, that Ilaf, that they, the part is that after the event of Abraha and what they want to attack Quraysh with the elephants, elephant army and companion elephant, and Quraysh survived miraculously. The prestige of Quraysh with skyrocketed. They start to become people of God. They were custodian. Things were on the rise for them. First few generations earlier, Qusayy settled down over there. So it seems the shrine maybe was there, but not many people living there. Maybe some custodian or something, because it wasn't very habitable. It was not possible to do agriculture in it. Is impossible to do it because of the type of volcanic land does it have. So, but gradually, because of the shrine people coming, they open up two markets, people gathered for trading and selling okaz, and another one, and then also they establish the months of haram months too. So they establishing some institutions besides, they kind of bank on the prestige they get, and they put it in good practice. This haram months also give the time for people doing trade or trade. Most of it, the times also somewhat match with uh, for Hajj season too. So all of these months give them a special situation that brings some prosperity to the city. And then this is kind of referred to all those that a sense of identity they find, the sense of uh, bonding they have, and the safe of cooperation. Because look, they taking caravans, and the whole issue of the caravans is like you are is a financial institution which is sophisticated. Look, like you're buying shares of a company. You become part shareholder, but you own part of the company. These caravans are kind of that kind of financial institution. It wasn't one person's money. It was everybody had something and put in it, and then they manage it all together, and then they make the caravan, and some of the Quraysh leaders can take the caravan to the places, buy and sell, and bring it back and get the profit and share the profit proportionally. So this is a modern institution. It's exactly like maybe Apple shareholders doing it. Okay, that's a maybe $1 trillion company, but it's the same idea. And the fact, the whole thing, they're trusting each other, they stick to each other. Sometimes in a small family, brothers and brothers cannot trust each other. They have dispute and inheritance. But it seems these people start to get after that event, or for whatever reason, I have to say there is a deficiency today. I want to keep it short, and then some of the things I'm doing is on the fly without out of the script. So what I looked to was not the traditional Islamic Arabic sources, which I felt become large. And maybe inshallah we do it more. So my idea was to do tafsir and then do one, the Western source about the Meccan trade. But I'm now saying some stuff a little bit from memory, sometimes from reading. And these can be go in depth and better examples and how he has done it is done. But we are familiar partially, not familiar. We at least heard about the caravans was taken by Quraysh. Even the Battle of Badr later was exactly Muslims want to capture the caravan. But Abu Sufyan was tipped out. He changed the way, so the caravan escaped, and some Muslims were not happy because some members of the army of Prophet, they were more preferring loots or booty of the war. But God told them, okay, what we have for you is better than that. So they end up getting to the fight of Badr. So the whole caravan was crucial for the whole Meccan economy. And then that was a kind of war between two city-states, Medina and Mecca. These are other stories, but let's going back. The fact, look, this is not so simple. Oh, they make a car. No, it's not so simple. I mean, you need to really at least this 1,500, 1,500 people. Again, also, Mecca wasn't a huge, big city. It wasn't cosmopolitan. It's not Alexandria. It wasn't even Palmyra or Damascus or I mean, we all have some ideas, maybe at most 1,000, 1,500 people with slaves, servants living over there. So we talk about a small village type that becoming kind of city and all family to each other and get somehow prominence. And then we have genealogy. There is an article I really like to discuss, but we have the genealogy of the Quraysh recorded because they're a very prestigious tribe, and later the whole privileges in Umayyad and Abbasid Empire was based on genealogy, and Quraysh was the tribe, the rulers should be from them and all those kind of stuff. And so the genealogy of Quraysh is recorded very well, and a person recently kind of mapped them, and then notice how many they are, whose children of whom, or how many brothers, sisters they have. And then he did this interesting Poisson statistics because, for example, if you are a bunch of families, the possibility you have, for example, family of 2 brothers, no sisters, or their probability, is very rare. You got, for example, family of 7 children, no sisters, all 7 brothers, or vice versa. I forgot what exactly he did statistic on. I guess some of it were about the siblings who didn't marry. That I don't know. I remember. I forgot. I don't know. But the point is that the description of the book very well match with what Poisson statistics tells us. This Poisson statistics also this kind of statistics done by insurance companies, they have lots of all of these. They do this kind of work a lot too. So that means that okay, the genealogy over there is very authentic because they couldn't know, somebody wrote it later on or made a mistake or made it up and no, they don't know Boston statistics to fit it. So it's very good. It's very accurate. And then you see the genealogy is not big. It's exactly what it said. 5, 6 generations you have over there. You have maybe 4 or 5 before Prophet, 2 after that. The genealogy have it, and exactly what we know. Qusayy come over there and settle over there, and then maybe a couple other people join, and then the tribes start to be there. But still, these 1,000, 1,500 is not that small too, and the fact they managed to stick together and manage this commerce is what Quran is referring to. Putting money in it, managing the caravans. Maybe there were not only one, but I think usually, as we know, there is one big one, maybe a few of them going this way and that way. and then people put money in it, and then it's sold and coming and distributed, like shareholders meeting, companies, board. They have the board, maybe CEO of the whole caravan. Is a business. And then the other thing you have to, when you're going, that's the important one, negotiation. Part of it, the security, which the last verse mentioned, also all those security in your hometown, but also parts, الذي أتاهم من جوع and آمنهم من خوف, secured them from fear. But part of the security, although mostly this is about their living or something, but also when the caravan is going, you cannot easily go through it. Nowadays even a toll tax, how it is tolls, but they're really other tribes, because as the war of all on all. So there was lawlessness, there was no regulation, especially Hijaz. So when you go to the territory, another tribe, you have to either be friend of them or have some deal with them, or they will attack you. So these caravans are weak, they go slowly, they have merchandise on them. So there's all negotiations, deals were there. So, this is what Quran is reminding them, but it's telling them this binding uh, uh, is a favor of God to you. The fact you could, the whole saved you, the prestige, and then help you to be prosperous, and then so on, is that. But anyway, let's continue, because, and then regarding Quraysh, this could be interesting topic. This Quraysh is a little bit unclear, their origin, the meaning of the word, how long they came, and people sometimes take the genealogy to Adam, we have to be careful. Prophet says that, okay, genealogy only take it to Mudar, or don't go too far. But as Allah says, okay, Quraysh is the name of the Prophet clan. They were the descendants of An-Nazr ibn al-Kanana. This Kanana is important. We had on those maps too. Maybe we see it again. So they're a branch of Kanana. Okay. These branch of Kanana. So all of these are also a people of this Al-Nazr. When Qusayy settled down, he called his cousins, his brothers and so on, to settle down too. And then the other third word. So we saw the first one was Ilaf, the second was Quraysh, the third one is Rihla, according to Majma al-Bayan, which is a Shia commentary, is the state of journeying, which, look, we have in Farsi or other language, Rahila means a caravan again. Rahila, which means, literally means strong camel, or Rehla, also maybe sometimes the people mention if a trip from this world to the other world. Here, Rehla refers to how the Quraysh used to leave Mecca for trade journeys. And then, look, this is important. The sanctuary of Mecca was a barren land. Barren in such a way that you never could grow in it. Not is not growing. You cannot never grow. They could not grow crops or raise farm animals. Although in the Mecca area, so maybe in the vicinity far away, it's possible to have goats or something like that, to be the nomads be growing. But okay, that's also the important question which Allah touched is important. Okay, how these guys are living, and that's the reason it wasn't settled much. Zamzam was there, but a story says Zamzam is a little bit later. I'm not sure any other wells were there. So one question is that if you're living somewhere, there must be water. The issue of water, for now, put it aside. Maybe besides Zamzam, they have another well or a few other sources of water. But because the story says Zamzam was discovered in time of Abdul Muttalib, which means 3-4 generations later. But putting that water issue aside, the issue of food is there. Okay, we cannot harvest, cultivate anything. So how you live, how you eat. So you need to import your food. For example, I'm living in a remote island, so something must be, or look, for example, station the peace people have in South Pole to investigate something, whether it's South Pole, you must be importing food over there. And that people argue that they necessarily must have been trading. But okay, it's not necessarily the trade should be this big caravans. It could be smaller trade with the local tribes, with the neighboring people in those markets. which we said two of them are very big, was seasonal near Hajj. I mean, the same way even nowadays people go to Hajj, very often also go to the bazaars and buy TV, stuff like that. When I was growing in Iran in 1990s, 80s, I think it was 80s, it was very common. People go to Hajj, get the TV, they'll stop bringing it from Hajj or so on. But the big, I mean, so we have maybe different trades, local bartering, but okay, we have these big trips which Allah mentions every year. They used to make two trips, one to Yemen and one in winter, and one to Levant in summer. So the winter they go to Yemen, which more our focus is, but also the summer they go to the Syrian, Palestine, Jordan area, Levant, and then this is how they've survived. And in the honor of the sacred house, people respected them. They were safe on the road from the highwaymen. Yeah, they got some prestige and honor. The other tribes really didn't want to try to attacking them. After Abraha's, they survive. They become people of God. And usually they get deals with them very fast. Say, oh, okay, you're Quraysh. Okay, give me this much, go through it. We're protecting your guests and so on, which they may not give the same deal to other tribes. So this is the important part, the security, which the last verse says, people respected them. They were safe on the road from highwaymen and at home from raids. All these could have been investigated more detailed in traditional sources, but for now, let's having in it. And I will discuss also something about this Ilaf of Quraysh. Okay, let's let it, but I maybe have to go faster. For harmonizing the Ilaf for the Quraysh, the letter law for at the beginning of this verse signifies justification, ta'til. The subject of this verse is God, who created peace and security among the Quraysh. So he's explaining how this is the Ilaf for the Quraysh. So and then adding a harmonized, and then you're harmonizing for them in the winter and summer journey. This verse shows that God harmonized and facilitated for the Quraysh. The implied meaning is that because God has made it safe and smooth for the Quraysh to travel in summer and winter. A little bit, maybe this wasn't much needed. Okay, but I just read it. Okay, now the next verse is فَلْيَعْبُدُوا رَبَّ هَذَا الْبَيْتِ again. So because of these blessings I give you, which you're deeply familiar part of your life, please, I mean, these are early verses. Okay, I'm your God, you accept your people of God, so people of Allah, so just worship me, the Lord of this house. I mean, in one sense, this could be discussion how they understood Kaaba if they are polytheists. Because in other polytheistic religions, the shrines are sometimes dedicated to one specific God. Was it that like that? Or some people thought this was the house dedicated to Allah. So there were a few deities, the supreme deity Allah, and then this was the house of Allah. That's a possibility. As I said, for example, Hinduism, a Greek pantheon, each city have one is God. One goes Apollo, one goes Zeus, and then each city, for example, Athens has its own temples, maybe different temples, or sometimes one city stick to one God, or different temples, or Hindus, as we have for Brahma, Vishnu, Shiva. Each of these Brahma is this creativity of God, creator, Vishnu, preservers, like soldiers, also preservers, and Shiva, destroyers. So each have their own temple. You don't mix the temples, and then you go to either of them or one of them or something like that. So was Al-Bayt was known before Islam as the house of Allah. Some people say that, but the Hubal was there, but Hubal was it big, too big, or this Kaaba was a little bit unique, and then maybe even polytheism in Arabia was different. It was not too much inclusive. Sometimes they say there were many idols over there. I mean, 360, and also even because they were inclusive, they included the images of Jesus and Mary. That I am not discussing, and I haven't looked at it, to be honest, in detail. The new ideas was how people look to that before Islam. Was it a dedicated house to Allah, or with some other things in it, or no, it was general house. Uh, it could be it's known by the house of God because the bigger, we Quran mentions other deities, Lat, Manat, Uzza, or daughters of God. Actually, their shrine, it's my understanding is was more prosperous, bigger, more important than the one in one. Okay, in one aspect, this is more sacred, and they all Arabia accepting it and coming to that. But but it's maybe not as big. But those three shrines, especially one of them was, again, one of them Meccan people used to go more. One of them Ta'if people used to go more. Manat, I think. Uh, Uzza, which is we call Venus. Meccan people used to go more. A lot, which is a little bit different. Medina people used to go. They have their temples. And Abu Lahab, the uncle of the Prophet, was the custodian of the shrine of Uzza, which is a little bit off Mecca. That exactly, I don't know how it works. And his wife. So, so they got, so what is that shrine exactly relationship with this one? This works, and also, that some of the narrations which the Islamic traditional books have mentioned have always been uh, a little bit under question. So anyway, so not because those are need or don't talk. So we don't do that. Just we say, okay, this is very clear. So God wants to worship only God, and this way. Uh, uh, okay, in some these three verses say the Quraysh must worship the Lord of this house because he has made it safe for them to travel in summer and the winter. As a result, they can make a living in security. This is the meaning we can infer, assuming the chapter has a theme and context of its own, separate from the previous. But there are guys which connected, as we said, this surah to Al-Fil, and say they were one surah. And then other that which I totally reject, and Allah will reject, but my rejection is more categorical, very 100% because of the structure. And okay, we don't need to read what they say because it's not wrong. And then Allah says, the problem with these views is better one can deduce them from the theme and context of the chapter. He said, look, doesn't make sense. You mixing them, pushing it, forcing it, and then the whole chapter seems a separate theme, structure, but it is related. I can talk about, for example, Iran, but two different ways. And then he adds, okay, the last one, who has fed them against hunger and secured them from fear. This is the two features of Mecca. Technically they should be hungry because generally everybody at ancient times are hungry. All the things is to survive, to cultivate food. But the Mecca has a problem. It's a place that you cannot cultivate food. And then you need to import it. Okay, the other thing we have to know, the Quraysh always was divided in two groups in these tribes. One of the settled one live in the cities, and one were nomads. Uh, uh, so even Quraysh had that branch too. When they refer to each other, those nomadic ones are not much mentioned in storybooks. We don't have as much get the prestige. All the tribes are like that, more or less. Maybe later on history said. And I think those guys somewhat do the raising the cattle. I mean, maybe uh, uh, animals, like there was the prophet was shepherd. There was shepherds to me. So they must be going around uh, in the oases or the places that around there, a little farther off Mecca, which there could be some vegetation fine, and then these cattle can grow, eat on them. So uh, that dynamic is interesting too. And that the tribe had branches. A part of it would settle, like, and then you see the business trade, their cousin shrine, but there are cousins or the other branches which somewhat are not. Sometimes they call it Mauritius Hollow, and I forgot the English translation. They were given names to them. So that we must have in mind. But then, so the fact, so some, because I mean, I'm saying it cannot be all imported. What is imported mostly, I think, would be grains. And what we will see, what the Qurayshi had for their trade is uh, leather or leather or we'll see a little bit some other stuff. So I'm thinking with the branch of them which raise the cattle going around, they get the leather from to trade, and also because of the shrine, people visit, spend money, uh, and also those markets they collect some money, but then that money was also become their capital to put the caravans, and then we'll see because start business you need initial money, either you have to loan it or you must get it in. And also again, it's mentioned Hashem is the one ancestor of Prophet Muhammad, was very responsible also for this trade thing too. But so this issue of food or hunger is important, also security, which all these tribes had. And Quraysh was a little immune about it because of the shrine, because of the haram months, and also because of the whole respecting God and the trading one. So this verse points to two evident blessing and favor of God upon them, namely food and safety, and as a result, in facilitating their journeys, they could live in a land that was infertile and had safety while their neighbors did not. Other neighbors sometimes raided each other. We have verses Quran even give oath to those when the one tribe raiding to the other one, and all those stuff. And then, as he said, they for all of these blessing, God mentions a couple of blessing, and they tell them, okay, please worship God, the Lord of this house, and then again mention them two other blessings. Regarding the narrations, actually something, because that's more our topic the rest of the day will be mostly about what they were trading actually, and what was the trade routes. We'll go over there, but I think there are some stuff here with this tafsir Qumi. The early part of it has some interesting view. So concerning Ilaf of Quraysh, concerning for harmonizing, not interesting stuff. But again, you see mixes with his own opinion, so we have to be careful which one is accurate, which one maybe not. Concerning for harmonizing for the Quraysh, the Ilaf of Quraysh, harmonizing for them. Tafsir Qumi says the two verses, the harmonizing for the Ilaf of Quraysh, Ilaf of Rahmat Shita was safe. So these two parts. Tafsir Qumi says this was revealed about the Quraysh because they made a living through making two journeys, one to Yemen in the winter, one to the Levant in summer. From Mecca, they used to take leather, which makes sense. I don't know where they get it. Maybe not themselves, but they got it from some other people and sending to other people. So you can be trader, get it from one set of people and take it to set of other people. You're the middleman. Nuts and seeds, and then you see whatever seed traders would sell to them. So there are some seed traders, and maybe get their leathers or what they have, and then as I said, those markets, Okaz and another one, also important. People like fairs and markets, and people come and sell something, get something else. So it seems the leather is theirs, and the other stuff made by them, and maybe some other manufacturing thing based on the cattle, sheep, goat they have, and then what other people in them selling them, then they get it, sell it to other people. Okay, and then the other very, very important one is the spice, and also the perfumes. That is more the Meccan one. That was the tradition. We will see there is a dispute here. That was about the general Arabian, South Arabian, Yemen's historically very important for spice trading, which we'll see how, but also substances for like make a good smell, like myrrh and frankincense, and then they were basis of, we can call it perfumes. And then this hadith, this narration, Tafsir Qumi says, I don't know who he has narrated. I didn't check. Is it hadith or just as a commentary. In the 11, they would trade these for clothing and refined flour and grain. As I said, they got refined flour. They want to have the bread and grain. They get it in Syria and Palestine, which they cultivate land and they can sell them some flour. But they used to get, okay, that's the point. But then he had some stuff which, yeah, let's see. They used to get along with each other. That's actually what I was saying. That they work together, the bonding, that they could work this, shareholding company together is good. They work with each other on the paths. They would travel small groups. Each group would buy a chieftain from Quraysh. Okay, maybe the mechanism was like that. So few small caravans side by side. This was how they made a living. And the latter part is some he added, which is not right. And then element says doesn't match. So, okay. This is good. I think some piece of information which we have our traditional sources giving us. So, kind of for now is the basis of the surah. Let's see also the study Quran, which I don't think we have much more because much of the things we said. The Sunni tafsir have also that issue of the two surahs are the same or not. And then Ibn Kathir, I think, did the right conclusion that they're, although the two are connected in meaning, they are to be considered separate surahs. Again, now there is one piece of point is added here. Let's read this. Because, again, I haven't gone, there were articles, even though it's in academia, which were discussing about the Quraysh trade. They focus on they go to the traditional sources and see what does it mean, was it. I haven't gone through that, but any piece we can get here, we can keep it and then see. Okay, if we go non-Islamic sources, what the case will be. Besides the discussion about Ilaf, says when it came to be connected, this Ilaf Quraysh, to secure passage, where Ilaf and the related word Ilf were used as the names for the grants of security that Quraysh reportedly received from the surrounding powers. So here Ilaf is a little bit read more limitedly, which I'm not sure Quranic one wanted to that limited. The one we did was general, the bonding between them, the ulfa, the connection produced. But here is a technical word that when you get security, when you're passing through different places and they like give you passport, visa, get entry, getting out. When you get visa or getting into a country, you're also protected. But I think some of it is reading later on because the commentators are talking about much later time or the imagination projecting back. But anyway, it could be true. But it says that this Ilaf was used as a name for grants of security Quraysh reportedly received from the surrounding powers, Byzantium, Persia, Abyssinia, and Yemen. Yeah, there were trades to Persia and Byzantium, but I'm not sure there was Meccan trade. Syria, you can consider it Byzantium. But whether from Mecca people go to the Persia, we don't know much. I don't think so. And they don't go directly to Abyssinia, but also there are maybe Amr As knew Abyssinia, so it's possible in some way they have connection. But the thing is that in the winter, Quraysh would travel to Yemen when they purchase spices and other commodities coming from India. Okay, so you see now a new place come to the story. The trade is a little bit bigger. Like now, this China is somewhere in the trade. The spices, which I said is important, and also come from India, but somehow find their way to Yemen. Okay. And then the Quraysh buy the spices not from India directly, but to Yemen, like you find the Chinese or American merchandise, not necessarily from American China, but in another market. So Quraysh in the winter would travel to Yemen and maybe carry some stuff or buy some stuff from there. But among the things you buy is spices to sell it somewhere else. But the spices are originally coming from India. And then, as I said, leather is theirs. I think leather is their own making from the sheep's cattle they raised. Not in the Mecca, but the other branch used, or as we said, Prophet it was access shepherd or other one outside the Mecca to this periphery Mecca. I mean, surrounding parts, but the leather is theirs. Spice mostly come from India, but the perfumes, good scented plants coming from South Yemen, from Arabia Felix. So you see, I think if we break it down, and then we'll see one other factor there, which is very interesting. I think this will understand what they were doing. Then in summer, they carried these to Syria where they sold them and purchased agricultural products. Remember, we see the other hadith said that green flour, good flowers and good grains and stuff they got, or maybe some other fine linen or something they come from Syria. So again, so if we go, I didn't go to all traditional sources. Yeah, we know have much more detail. I think the issue of security, because the last verse, remember, again, God says, who relieved them of hunger and made them safe from fear. There is verses in Surah 16, verse 112, 113, which is good to read it in the context of giving you security, because it says God sets forth a parable. So God gives an example. This verse is Quran, a town secure at peace. I think it is legitimate. We think when Meccan here, they're thinking the first thing about their own town. That's their image. Look, better you think you're living some city, you think your city is secure and peace. Maybe you're living, I don't know. And now in Shanghai, you have that feeling, but maybe 50 years ago, you don't have that feeling. And then maybe the people in, for example, I don't know, some cities, US nowadays, they don't feel, at least the image Trump administration sells is not that image, for example. So, but I feel when Quran, I stop in the middle of reading, but when the Quraysh heard a town secure and peace, that is the image they have of themselves. And then, as I said, sometimes do, sometimes don't. So, if reading the meaning again, God sets forth a parable, a town secure and at peace. His provision coming unto it abundantly from every side. This exactly is really describing Mecca. Yet it was ungrateful for the blessing of God. So God let it taste the garment of hunger and fear for that which they had wrought. A messenger from among themselves had surely come unto them, but they denied him, and so the punishment seized them while they were wrongdoers. Okay, look, this is very, very similar to the situation Quraysh is or was, and a messenger from them come to them, and they were not listening to him. But the difference is that the first verse we saw in Surah 106 must be early Meccan. This is late Meccan, okay, later Meccan. But you see, these verses are, I'm pretty sure, yeah, we can say is intratextuality. These verses are again exactly explaining a situation in Mecca, and then kind of is a threat or warning to them, guys. Other people which have the same situation were punished. You guys, after all these requests or many years invitation, you are not accepting me. And then there is another verse. Okay, then we have another verse overall, put again things in context about Mecca, is verse 126, Surah Al-Baqarah, which Abraham prays. But in his prayer kind of tell us what the city was, at least at his perspective. My Lord, make this a land secure. So this security was in the prayer of Abraham from the beginning for Mecca, when he placed Hagar and Ismail over there. My Lord, make this land secure and provide its people with fruits, those among them who believe in God and last day. God said, whoever disbelieve, I will grant him enjoyment for a while, then I will compel him to the punishment of fire. What an evil journey's end. So I think we looked enough for the traditional view of the tafsir of these two surahs, but then we want to a little bit discuss about the trade. Uh, yeah, let me just show you something in the slides. Uh, uh, yeah, today my discussion will be really based on this article, and which is Mecca and the caravan routes in pre-Islamic antiquity, which is this part of this series of article by the Quranic context, history and literary investigation, the Quranic media, and Judicial Neubert. So let's go to. Okay, I must go right here, but I have to choose here. So look, this trade of Mecca seems simple, but a little bit become later on complicated, So Professor Bukhari starts. One of the principal questions, the history of pre-Islamic Mecca is whether Mecca did maintain close trading connection with South and North Arabia and Mesopotamia and participate in the Trans-Arabian caravan trade, or whether it was an isolated enclave whose rise had nothing to do with the commercial activity. Okay, our answer is that it is kind of commercial activity, but we should avoid exaggerations and some claims which are not accurate. Uh, it wasn't a super center because this is traditional Islamic historians later on. Okay, we make so Mecca. Oh, it was the greatest town before Islam. It wasn't. As I said, it wasn't very ancient. It wasn't very old. It wasn't very big. Uh, but there is a group of people changed their life. Look, for example, in Tehran, in the suburb of the eastern suburb of Tehran, there was a village I know when I was a child, but they got some idea sometimes when I left Iran in maybe 2000, 2010, that, okay, now because of situation in Tehran, can change. They can make their land, build houses, which is good weather for like what's the name, vacation houses, cottage houses, because it's close to the city. But if people want to get weekend out to go somewhere better weather or in the mountains, they may come villas or stuff like that. And they completely changed their fortune. The village was very plain not, but all will become very wealthy because they get the land, they construct it on it, selling it. Or you see in America when, if, for example, in Pennsylvania, because of fracking, some villages which are old, the old company come and buy the land lease and all become millionaires, all the villagers. So the situation changed. But anyway, these answers to these questions were not very controversial, were some questions, but then Patricia Cronin wrote a book, Make and Trade and the Rise of Islam. And then, as usual, he raises some question, disputed all the accepted beliefs and all doubts bring it. And people answered her. And so, okay, some of the questions valid or at least, okay, worth investigation and finding a better answer. Some were, I mean, some were just just rising doubts, which was not very much basis. And if she had investigated better, can do that. Uh, uh, and some of it was not the mistake of the Muslim scholars. Uh, that some Western scholars have some mistakes, and then is a correction to what Western scholars thought what was the case. But if you go clearly look to Muslim scholars, uh, didn't have the idea. But among the things Crone was disputing was the Meccan commercial supremacy, which, as I say, it's exaggeration, and Mecca need not need to be commercially more important. For example, those cities in Yemen, which it wasn't, and like Najran, Mecca wasn't Najran. natural geographically pathways, and it always was bigger. Even Medina and Taif, maybe commercially very important, but usually because Mecca is so sacred and the Quraysh become dominant, the Quraysh from Mecca, sometimes you imagine later on, okay, Mecca was everything top, but maybe it was a more important, like Rome, maybe very sacred city, but necessarily not the most important commercially city in Iran, like Isfahan could be more. So Mecca wasn't the commercial supremacy. And then some of the problems or challenges are self-made, but then but anyway, but Patricia Corona raised questions, and then there are people who want to answer them. One of them was an investigation by Sergeant, which is actually went to the traditional Islamic sources to answer Patricia Cronin, which we are not going to go through that because saving time. But the one we have here by Mr. Bukhari, the Professor Bukhari, Mikhail de Bukhari, which is Russian, and then he's looking to the non-Islamic Arabic sources, contemporary, and look, I read Cronus sentences; they're all answered, but I'm not sure when I'm reading it, I will answer all of those. So to see what the taste of what she raised, and all those stuff. According to Krona, transportation of perfumes by sea had become the norm. Most Western scholars taught this trade. And then even Robert Hoyland says there was a French Belgian scholar, the earlier 20th century, which actually he's very against Shias and it doesn't like Umayyads a lot. But then he taught that this trade Mecca, Ilaf of Mecca, is related to perfume trade. But the point is that there was historically a big perfume trade from Saudi Arabia to the Roman Empire for the temples, houses, when they're wet and humid, like some of the toilets, stuff like the bathrooms. You need to change the smell. So they were burning or using these plants which have good smell, and also perfumes, all those stuff. So that trade was very lucrative, but they say this collapsed. So let me read for you. And so Corona says, so Mecca could not be doing perfume. And then if you see the traditional, I read it for you, wasn't stress on perfume, was on leather and nuts and spices. But then sometimes these guys also confuse the time and era. But let's read it because I want to go faster. And then I give you just a summary of the paper. According to Corona, transportation of perfume by sea had become the norm already in the first century before Common Era. And the overland routes couldn't have survived the competition for long. She's disputing also there was no need in the inland routes of Arabia to have a trade. So all were on ship. So what do you mean by that? So I mean, he's just putting on this argument. Cronin therefore concludes, it is not clear why some scholars believe that the overland route to have continued into the 4th century Common Era or later, or why Islamists generally assume it have to retain its importance until the time of Mecca's rise to commercial prominence, or to have recovered by that. So she disputes the whole land route. It says no need for it. For example, we have airplane to Mecca, go to Mecca, and there's Hajj. Nobody takes. I mean, when I was a child, people would do it, going by cars via Kuwait or so on. But nowadays, you rarely heard somebody takes the cars going to Hajj pilgrimage. So she's using that kind of argument. And then he says, though Meccan traders were active in areas as far as away from Mecca and Syria and Najran, Corona intends to show that they did not trade any kind of perfumes or spices. The main commodities of Meccans were leather and other merchandise of local importance, which actually matches what the tradition of, as I read it to you for me, says. But then he says, which had never been scarce anywhere else. No, it doesn't make. It's not that necessarily you took something somewhere that never have it. But yours may be cheaper. You have this one. You have to buy. They have to sell you, okay, they take your leather. So her arguments sometimes are like that. And we're not going to read her arguments, but let's just hear it, because you may hear it in some YouTube stuff too. In addition to the predominance of the sea routes, Qur'an adduces other reasons why Mecca could not have participated in the incense trade. Mecca lay far away from the incense road, and the Arabian frankincense and related products has ceased to be of economic importance in the Greco-Roman world, since by the 3rd century coming out of the Roman market for the perfumes had begun to collapse and was never to recover. You know, this perfume in Rome was imported because they were rich and wealthy, or the houses were very good. When the whole economy, the whole situation collapsed, maybe the perfume market collapsed and didn't import it. But the point is that the mistake, which is a perfume market, was not Muslim scholars, it's the Western scholars that means. Now, there is work done replying to Crone, which very strongly, with harsh tone, which I would like, sometimes it was good to summarize that, by R.B. Sargent, who has concentrated but primarily Arabic Islamic sources. And Sargent's starting point is the fact the Valley of Mecca had been settled by Qusayy, in spite of his lack of natural resources, and actually exactly that was Allah said, and that the Meccans consequently had been forced to import their foodstuff. That is to engage in long-distance caravan trade. But I'm saying there could be a little bit middle way. They maybe import some of their food from the other branch of the tribe living this periphery of Mecca, precinct of Mecca, and taking care of the cattle and so on. But definitely, as we heard and read, if they want the better flour grains, they import it. Therefore, they had to have some kind of income, and pilgrimage to the Meccan sanctuary was involved in trading. Yeah, you know, still you want to import your food, you need to have some income. Actually, that means a gamble, I think Qusayy did. That risk it to settle down there, and then maybe had a new idea that can invite people for some reason, and to make money out of the pilgrimage and so on. But Sargent points out that Yemen and Syria were the most important suppliers of Mecca with the grain, which again we saw it with that. And in his rereading of the Arabic sources, he shows that Qurayshi merchants did trade in Yemeni luxury cloth, perfumes, and spices, but it wasn't the main part, but there was some. And that they could buy them in Aden, which is now the utter southmost of the Yemen, with the presence is attested fairly well. We know the Qurayshis or Arabs from Hijaz ending up in Aden in the South Yemen, and they have, I think, the leather for themselves, and then they do something about perfumes and spices, perfumes coming from the local Yemen, luxury clothes, I think maybe was made in Yemen, so on, spices from India, and so on. Now, so where the presence attesting very well that the leather goods of the Meccans could have been of high importance to remote markets such as Dhofar and Syria. Now, when Patricia Corona is so much generalized, yeah, the leather, I mean, Iranians can sell their corn or maybe some of the products or their milk products in Iraq. You know, we had it a few years ago. Kale, I think, is a brand in north of Iran, is selling it very good in Iraq. So it had all the markets. So it doesn't mean the Iraqis doesn't have it at all, but anyway. So this is the point we have to know. The main thing I think Meccans are trading with leather, but they mix other stuff out of leather. I'm not sure. Maybe footwear, maybe for the horses, maybe for the belts. I don't know. They do bags. I don't know. Water sacks, because it's called leather goods. Leather goods of the Meccans could have been of high importance to remote markets such as Dhofar, which we cite in Yemen and in Syria, and that the Meccans did really trade in those kind of wares, either producing them themselves or buying them from elsewhere. So that's kind of generally the thing. Some they make themselves, sometimes they buy, when they sell it, they give it to them, and they take it and sell it somewhere else. Yeah, then Sargent points out that the sources which Corona calls into question do not suggest the Meccans dominated the exchange of goods between Northern Arabia and Southern Arabia. They didn't say the biggest store or the London or New York or of the Hong Kong of the trade. No, there was some city over there, they do something. That the Quraysh did engage in trading, however, is much less unlikely than Qur'an makes it out. However, is much less unlikely than the Quran makes it out to appear. And Sargent convincingly defends the notions that the passage of the Quran does refer to the Mecca trading journeys to Yemen and Syria, which were based on security pacts with the neighboring tribes. And of crucial importance for a proper understanding of the role of Mecca in trans-Arabian commerce are the special status enjoyed by the Quraysh in virtue of their belonging to Bani Kanana and the protection granted to them by them to any merchant asking for Meccan territory. Okay, the other thing is that we know some pacts, halves or covenants. Most prophet Qurayshi people made. One of the prophet participated, and this is one of the few things in Jahiliyyah prophet was very proud of it, and that's called Half al-Fuzul, the covenant, the contract of the nobles or something like that. That's exactly was to protecting the property rights of merchants which come into Mecca and didn't belong to Quraysh or confederate tribes, but they were just from another tribe. Because one of them, the people stole them or tricked them and didn't pay them money. But then Meccans saw this is not good. Most of the stories talk about it in moral sense, which is true, but also this commercial sense too. When you have property security, property rights, that's you attract investments. That at least US for a while was known. People buy the US Treasury or other stuff because they're sure guaranteed their money is there backed. But when the trust goes away, things will go away. And I think that's also the part of the trading maybe happen inside Mecca itself, that the traders come to that territory maybe after they know these guys are because they have caravans bringing stuff. So maybe the other from Najd or inner parts of Arabia come by it from Mecca, for example. So such an analysis of the Arabic sources can be considered exhaustive. The present article proposed to offer a number of supplementary observations based on classical and South Arabian sources, which are likely to throw more light on the problem Mecca position in trans-Arabian trade. The data to be reviewed below strongly suggests that the caravan trade routes function throughout the entire pre-Islamic period, that they pass through the territory around today Mecca, and that the inhabitants of southern Hijaz did trade with South Arabia and East Africa in perfumes and spices. Okay, another place now we add is East Africa. So the imagination should be a little more careful now. We have Mecca trade going to north to Syria, Palestine, going to south to Yemen. And then we talked about India, that some spices from India come to Yemen. And now we talk about East Africa, which is means Ethiopia, which is natural. We saw that there were cultural, political, economic ties with them. Regarding the sources, okay, this discussed, but the only thing I want to read is that according to Quran, the state of knowledge about Meccan trade is so vague and that information given by the source is so contradictory that any attempt at reconstruction is futile. This is always she does. But then Bukhari replies, a mere enumeration of the sources mentioning the importance of the caravan trade through Arabia to the Mediterranean world suffice to show the Quran's positions formulate to category. Yeah, I mean, and then they all play this kind of, it's complex, they're contradictory and so on. And then he lists them. Some are interesting, even you have inscriptions, all those stuff, which I don't think we need to go through that. One of the hubs, but the trade in the whole Arabia. And then Arabia, as we consider it, is more or less the Arabian Peninsula now, consider Saudi Arabia, Yemen, and Oman, and maybe Emirat, those Gulf states, Persian Gulf states. But the only thing I want to add, Najran was an important hub of trade, definitely more important than Mecca. And then because it's the branching happening, the caravans usually go through it. So that's Najran. But one of the questions was why they needed caravans at all. This is a little bit complicated discussion, but it's very interesting. Because the main trade, okay, yeah, the question was this. He says, we go to this book, Peribulus Erythraean Sea. We know that from those ancient Roman sources that the South Arabian incense was transported simultaneously by land and by the sea, at least since the Greeks and Romans had established trade contacts with South Arabian ports under Ptolemy. So this is even before Christ, Jesus. So the Greeks and Romans discovered South Arabia. They call it Arabia Felix because more greeny, more agriculture, and more prosperous because of this trade. And we have kingdom of Saba, and then later on Himyarites or Azaramot or those kind of things. But then if you already have established sea routes, why you need caravans? Yeah, the question he asks is like this: if it is true that the caravans from South Arabia to the Mediterranean Sea had been in use throughout the entire pre-Islamic period, why were they not substituted by the Roman ships? So if this look, for example, the main trade now happens in the Pacific Ocean is between China and the US or some of the other South American countries. If the main trade is between India and okay, for spice, and maybe some perfume from South Yemen, and then with our ports in South Yemen like Hana or Mocha, like Hodeida or Aden or stuff, this kind of thing. Why? And then there are ports, in South Yemen, and then you have ports in India, and then things from India coming. So why we don't go with this land route? So why not all of it ships? Because it's cheaper, and because the main destiny wasn't Roman Empire. So why people should offload it from the ships and going to the caravans through the desert, and then you need camel. Because the other story also is that, which we know it is the case, this question at least not be asked in the sense which Patricia Crone asked, denying it. We know there were caravans. Historically, everybody know, but that's surprising. Why they need caravans? Why, for example, if the sea routes, you need train. For example, now you see China is worried that become sanctioned by the US or be trapped the sea routes, which are usual. Now you're looking to the train with Iran, going to the Central Asia. So breaking any, I don't know if the US wants to put embargo on China, they have ways to go through it. But anyway, the answer is this. There are a few features. One is that the ships which coming from India were usually full with spices, which and pepper and other Indian spices, which are famous. I mean, even Christopher Columbus discovered US by that. But then they do not have sometimes for perfumes or incense or things from Saudi Arabia. But he goes a little bit detailed explanation to that's one of it. I mean, they can live space, but they didn't. And then the more important thing, which I don't want to go through this all because we have other stuff to say, is this timing of the ships because of monsoons and the strong winds in Indian Ocean and Red Sea. and the directionality of it, and then the seas sometimes are, I mean, monsoons coming a lot in India, Bangladesh, and make damage and so on. Uh, the directionality of the wind sometimes is from southwest to northeast, sometimes reverses northeast to southwest. It limited which direction they can trip. You cannot go against the wind. It's waste of. I mean, you have to row the boat, which is I mean, it's useless. Then the ships are big, so they limited the times can start. They can travel. The time can reach. All of these is listed, and then because of the harvest time for these perfumes, sometimes they couldn't catch it. You know, either it was too early or too late. At most, they would catch the second harvest, which wasn't usually as a good. So all of these added that that the perfume parts sometimes were not going through the ships, going to land routes. But this is very detailedly explained. I don't think we can go, but anybody can research now, can know what to answer Patricia Crum. So due to both climatic and economic conditions, therefore Roman naval traders were neither interested in nor capable of taking aboard incense from Qana. Qana is the port in South Yemen, which was important and mostly a little bit toward east of it, to Hazaramot era. I have to show the map, but still is there. And then that's the important port from India. People stop. And then the ships which are doing the trade was Roman naval traders. But as you said, climatic one, because of the wind and the economic conditions, were not interested in taking abroad incense. So those incense, which are good smelling things, were not going to the ships. This conclusion is confirmed archaeologically. Only a limited amount of Indian merchants has been discovered at Ghana. Since the ships stopped, they're on their way to India, but hardly use it on the way back. And then also again, the stopping point of the ships going and coming back. Like go with the airplane flight, you maybe and then going for something here to LA, stop one place but return not. The ships we know, the Roman ships stop in Ghana when going to India, but then the return they didn't. They use they did it. Okay, that's one way. Hijaz is important. He goes to explain uh and then you have to discuss really, this is sometimes detailed, the pathways and why. Okay, if we accept that there are caravan routes, and this caravan route is called incense road, they're not going to sea route, they're going to land route. And then this incense road says land route, they're going to Arabia. Well, what is the position of Hijaz? Southern Hijaz, which Mecca is around it or not. This is a lot of work he has done, and it says it would have been made for more sense for traders coming to Bisha. I will show you the map. To go not to Okaz, but to Ataif, where they could take part in important first and religious ceremonies that would usually accompany these. After Taif, the road split two branches, one to Mecca and one leading directly to Medina. So look, if you look to the map, he has okay, I have to go back. And then it doesn't show the Taif. Taif is here. See, the other map shows. Sorry. Okay, so look, this is the bigger map. Yeah, it's make it smaller. You see. Okay. So this is, look, we saw in the Yemen before, and then the issue of Ethiopian Aksum Empire, and then this port of Adolis, uh, and then so sometimes this is the issue Ethiopia, and then the routes in this part, look. So it goes to Najran. Najran is a crucial one, and then very often this Bisha, which I have to go back. Taif is there, Mecca is there, and then you know, I mean, depends who's who. For example, even the Ethiopian ones, sometimes they give this route. But you know, the routes are not always safe. There are different empires which they fight each other sometimes. So sometimes they get this route, but sometimes they even prefer this route. Because also the goal is to reach, some of these parts are not much controlled, to reach ports which are controlled by the Romans and going to Egypt and so on. You know, so this Berniki is, you see, the old Europeans, uh, Greek names or this kind of thing. You see, all these are Greek names, and Mecca is here, and then Taif is here, Medina is close. And if I go back to this bigger map, he goes through all this discussion. This is Okaz, and then Mecca, and then where it's better to go, all those stuff. Medina here, so you see it's higher, and then all these names which are coming and all these routes. So I mean, maybe some of the things I cannot say it on the maps, and I want to go faster. So to finish it by, we should have done it by. I'm sorry. Do you have to 9:15? How long do I have? I can do.
No, I mean, if you want to continue till 9:30, it's okay, Dr.
Sure.
Ghoddoussi.
Thank you. So I try
Yeah,
to.
thank you. Because it's just last session, so I want to, yeah, please.
Thank you. Thank you. So lots of discussion. Hejaz is there. So it's like, you see, like a court, this guy putting his arguments. Okay, now we accept land roads are there. Okay, Hejaz are important. Which part of Hejaz they go? Okay, national is definitely is there. But then it goes, so we got somehow close to Mecca because after Taif, the road splits to branches to Mecca, Medina. There is an important issue that what about the Medinas it mentioned in older documents. The famous is the word, this Greek word, which is one of the mentioned by Ptolemy in geography. Look, it is Makoraba. But then some people say it's Mecca, Makoraba. And then, but then other, if you make it like without the vowels, making consonant, become Makrab. And then some people say, oh, Makrab is the Jewish for synagogue. So maybe it's referring to the temple. You know, which language is this? Because this is Greek, but definitely they pick it up from one of the languages over there. Was it Arabic? Was it some? But you know, he has some idea because then there was dispute. Okay, whether how Makaraba could be close to Mecca. You know, MK is close, but Makaraba is that. What he says that makes sense because this is the way the Westerners. It's not. This is not from Mecca. This is from Maghreb. And then this in many of these transliteration become K, like Farouk become Farouk, or we have a lot of this, especially in French version. This K sound for the G sound. Yeah. So and it says in Maghreb, and then he will explain that for those Greek, because we don't have many sources to mention Mecca. Okay, Mecca wasn't a big one, and more important locally, and it's latter. So that's the other thing. If you think this existed from the before common era, is not right because as we said, this settling Mecca and prominence is mostly a 6th century phenomenon after Abraham. I mean, settlement is early 6th century, maybe a little bit before, but you shouldn't go back. But it doesn't mean different necessarily didn't exist, maybe existed and declined and coming back. But he has some argument that this they used to call it there are two ways, and the city was very unknown, and maybe the name is coming from Maghreb. That is how they called it. Okay, this is the city of the Western way. And then he explained all the path roads, stuff like that. The earliest references to trade activity of the Arabs in classical sources, they mention it. Very some interesting stuff, but let's ignore this because really, I don't think we need to go. Yeah, there is some mentions of a group of people. According to Pliny, the merchandise was transported to the territory of Nabatai Trogodyte. Troglodyte. By troglodyte, classical cartographers always mean the inhabitants of East African coast living in faraway places between Aksum and the southern frontier of Egypt. The Nabatai troglodyte mentioned by Pliny must therefore be interpreted as referring to inhabitants of the Hijazi coast who were under the control of Nabateans yet lived outside the historical core territory. The expression thus means the Hijazi Arabs living on the coast of the Red Sea. Let's see, it was through the territory that the caravan trading perfume spices were conducted. So he's going kind of clarifying the map, and then he shows evidence that the routes which is said it was that. And then one other source says these sources are scarce. You see that the problem is, and each have some small piece, and he wants to put them around it. So we go a little faster, and then some latter parts are more specific. This book, which we also mentioned, Pre-Plus, also mentions the importance of East African perfumes to Arabia. So we talk about perfumes, and then we said the perfumes also come from Ethiopia, because Ethiopia climate was similar, even better. I mean, nowadays Ethiopia is more greener, and it can produce the same thing Yemen can produce. And then that could be shipped to this side, to West Hejaz, and then to the caravans going up. Because we said that Roman ships didn't, the seaports of Red Sea was not very good. And the Roman ships preferred when they got on the Ghana or from India coming, whatever, they don't stop too much Red Sea. You know, all these makes why the transportation was different. Okay, it says, the Pericles mentions the import of East African perfumes to Arabia and describes the Arabs as experienced traders and seamen active in the southern Arabian port of Muza. This is now it's called Moha, which is in South Yemen, which where perfumes and spices were the main commodity. The classical geographers never refer to, the only this side, but this one, all of these confirms that already between 2nd century before Common Era and the 1st century Common Era, the nomadic Arab population of the southern Hijaz participated in the sea and overland trade in the perfumes and the spices between East Africa and Mediterranean. Okay, this is a little bit before the time we want, but we have evidence from earlier times which nomad Arabs are really involved with sea trade routes, and the trade routes are exactly what it was traditionally are said. And we're going forward. It talks about East Africa and Hejaz. That's the one I showed it to you. It still is good to mention it. The Hijazi Arabs traded with East Africa via the sea routes. Some sources seem to indicate the presence of Aksumite population in the Hejaz in the 1st and 2nd century Common Era, maybe even earlier. Look, we said this issue of the Aksum Empire had very eye on the Yemen and even Western Hejaz. Sometimes maybe the land that may have controlled earlier centuries, 2nd and 3rd century Common Era, and then some of them maybe settled down. We have in this story of Najran that they were colonies of Christians, which could be African, could be Aksumite. The Aksumites used other trade routes to yes, some of these are detailed, but look, I maybe skip. So ignoring, let's go to the one which is more to us, and we finish in for about 10 minutes. Direction of Mecca. I a little bit short-circuited because even there are too many details we need to about East Africa and Hejaz, but generally we know that the caravan routes going up north-south, but also through the west of East Africa, which all the traditional stories said, and even why Muslims migrated. So as I said, we have India somewhere, then Yemen somewhere, Byzantine Roman Empire somewhere, and then Ethiopian somewhere, and then you can get many things from annex. We cannot break it down from what they got. But let's go to the more directly. Actually, this is directly more connected to what we discussed. So it says, Quran states that Quraysh used to send 2 caravans annually, one in the winter and one in the summer. According to Ibn Kalbi, Ibn Kalbi is the historian which wrote out before Islamic era. He wrote about the book of Idols. Some of it's correct, some of it It seems he wrote from very far distance. According to Ibn Kilab, the former was headed for Yemen, while the latter was bound with Syria. We know that, which is we saw. The winter one was Yemen, summer one Syria. Everybody now agree with that. Sargent has shown that caravans carried food for Quraysh. Again, we saw that before. The sources available to us do not say the Meccan caravans bore food from south. Okay, this is added. We know the caravans carry food, but as also we saw in Qumi and other ones, they don't bring food from the Yemen. So means they bring food from north. They bring it from Syria, as we said, the fine flowers and grains and so on. Uh, uh, there are also a host of references to spices and perfumes that were be found to be in Mecca as a result of trade transaction, for example, from Aden. So as we kind of guessed, and I think seems trivial, from south, they bring perfumes and spices. Perfume could be belong to Yemen or from Ethiopia. The spices, maybe Yemen has some, there were some questions here, but also mostly from India. You know, those Indian ships, some stop or whatever. So, and then the type of these material also aloe, kundur, we have kundur in Farsi too, more, uh, and all this stuff. And some of these also reflected in Arabic poetry. So we kind of getting better. What Meccan sell was mostly leather goods. Themselves may have to sell. Besides the money they maybe get in during the markets, when you are a shrine city, maybe people come like you mentioned when people visit you or Mecca, they bring money or in Iraq. But they have leather goods. South Yemen had the perfumes and spices, which come mostly from India, or perfumes coming from East Africa and Yemen. But when they go north, they mostly, besides other stuff, they usually get food, grains. Food, besides the meat, maybe they get from cattle. They maybe get grains from the north. So, and then this kind of the better map to kind of overall, we have the idea, the whole cycle, this Roman Empire, the trade routes, and so on. But okay, let's go to one interesting thing because also this is the wine. First, there are some this kind of things. This revision say, oh, Quran talks about grapes. So Quran talk about food and fruit. So, but Arabia didn't have any agriculture. Mecca is barren, so they didn't see the grapes. So maybe Quran wasn't revealed in Mecca. Quran must be revealed somewhere else or written somewhere else. Oh, it's going to Arabia. This is an argument, but the point I maybe not leave, but they would eat something. So they import the grapes or so on. So that this kind of arguments is silly, like Arabs never see or heard about grapes or wine. Now, this is talking about Arabian wine, which is interesting. So this wine has a very different dynamic. I finished with this. There are very interesting features in it. Uh, uh, so besides those stuff which we usually talked about, leather, spice, perfume, and grain and flour. Now we come to the wine. Look, Mecca is very close to the other city, Taif. As I said, Hijaz has three important cities, Mecca, Medina, Taif. Taif, we forget, Taif was a tribe of Sabif were living over there. Tribe has a temple for Manat, and also it is a little bit mountainous, has much more weather, and is still even today people in Mecca when summer is warm, they have for vacation they go to Taif, is much better weather, mountainous, cold, and with lots of orchards or gardens, so on. So the fact that the region of around Taif situated a 2-day journey from Mecca and was rich in grapes raises the question of the origin of the Arabian wine that was exported to India already in the first century coming around. Now, some records shows that Arabia export to India imported wine. So, you know, the other question was that, okay, these guys get spice from India. So India gets what from them? And now the records of Romans shows they get wine. Well, what type of wine? The record shows three, one from Italy, one from Syria, Syria from Lazabia, you know, the port which in Syria was Alawites Muslim living over there in the Mediterranean. And then those records says Arabian wine. And then the question was, okay, where this Arabian wine is produced? Was it South Yemen? But the argument says he argued very detailed. No, this must be in Taif, and maybe Medina. But Taif has it definitely, maybe Medina. So there is an Arabian wine market, you know, like we have Canadian ones nowadays, so on. And that Arabian wine, which we know definitely from records go to India that far, is not produced in nowhere else except near Mecca in Taif. And then says this viticulture, which, you know, growing grapes and harvesting and making wine and so on, is the name viticulture, must have been a quite developed industry around there. And he says Saudi Arabia cannot have been the source of the Arabian wine. And then it's Taif, and then since Saudi Arabia cannot have been the source of Arabian wine, the most probable origin of this is Taif. And at the very beginning of the Christian era, we have examples of wine drinking is attested in Mecca and Medina. So again, you know, it's not that they never see grapes, they have wines or so on over there. They imported it. But the most interesting thing is that in this context, it is important to know that viticulture at Ta'if was a Jewish monopoly. So that's trade of the wine maybe to India and Arabian Peninsula, and then it was caravan routes, and it was taken on land. It was Jewish monopoly. That is interesting because Taif is not that north, but from Medina and above, all those cities are actually Jewish settlements, or at least Jews are sitting there. You have Medina, you have Khaybar, you have Ola, you have Medina to the Hajj. They're all Jewish traders, and then especially the one agriculture, especially Medina, you know, is controlled by them. I'm thinking there is a wine in Medina too, but I didn't search it. This article didn't mention it. And Ta'if has it, and it's most probable when it says monopoly, it is these Jewish traders that buy it, and you know it's profitable, and selling it and taking it to the south. So they must by caravan roads taking it to the south. Maybe use the Quraysh caravans, because we know some commercial connection between Mecca and Jews of Medina. And before Islam, you know, it's not like that. You know, it's not, I mean, you know, the father of Prophet died in Medina, and the mother died over there. The grandfather was there, so there was much close connection between Mecca and Medina and Mecca and Taif. And that's interesting. So it's possible they base mostly in Medina, and maybe they have wine over there, because we know they have the better fertile lands in Medina. The Arabs, which are Ansar, you know, or the Aus and Khazraj, have less quality, less quality, lands with less quality than the Jewish tribes. Now, grape or zabib was a commodity commonly carried by the caravans of the Quraysh. We know that too. How, for example, Tabari in the story of the events of Badr, I think December 63 mentions that the caravan of Quraysh were carrying raisins and leather and other mentions of Quraysh. So you see, matches what we know. The main one was leather till now, which they produce by the cattle around them, but also raisin. And that raisin, which is, okay, grape, is not Mecca produce, but it's Taif and Medina. And they are the truckers or the traders. And then, more interestingly, it mentions in the At-Tabari that this caravan of Quraysh carrying raisins and leather after finished soon on a merchandise was accompanied by Senator Amr al-Hazrami. So the guide or the leader was a Hazrami. Hazrami is a Hazaramut in the Yemen and then near at the Ghana port. So the point is this: it's kind of given that the caravan taking the raisin and leather to that port on the South Yemen, which maybe the raisin or the whatever. I don't know how they sent the dry it. I don't know how the shipping the raisin, the grapes working. Maybe dry it like raisin, sent to India, and then the leather maybe to that city, and then bringing other stuff. As he said, the presence of certain Hazrami among the Quraysh is remarkable. This points the connection between the Quraysh and Hazaramut. Besides the craft and trade, navigation must have been the main occupation of the Hijazi Jews. It talks about a little bit, it talks about Hijazi Jews, so let's put it aside. But it says, in summary, the viticulture was practiced by the Jewish population of Taif. Grapes played a role in the caravan trade of the Quraysh, in which a certain of Hazram is said to have been involved. Arabian wine was traded to India via Ghana, and an inscription made by Jewish caravan owner of so on shows explain that. And then the whole conclusion, I will read it at the end of our discussion. Conclusion. Classic and Arabic sources confirm that southern Hijaz is in general, and the region around Mecca in particular, were intimately connected with South Arabia, East Africa, and Eastern Mediterranean through the caravan trade. The earliest references to such connections date from the 2nd century before Common Era. The Meccan trade in perfumes and spices, among other things, the Meccans traded in perfumes and spices, among other things, and this trade was concluded via the Meccan territory and by the Meccan themselves, so that leather and raisin. Even though one cannot speak of a Meccan supremacy in the perfume trade, the data present above confirms the following. Mecca lay on the incense road. Those roads are for perfumes. The incense road survived until the 6th and 7th centuries, to the beginning of Islam. And inhabitants of southern Hijaz participated in trade flowing through it, mostly as caravaneers. The caravan trade thus lost none of its importance to the sea routes and function because some special features were happening over there, and they take some other stuff internally, and then from those ports were shipped. Serious and functional through the entire pre-Islamic period. Hence, from the last centuries before Common Era until the rise of Islam, the southern Hijaz was connected with East Africa, South Arabia, and the Eastern Mediterranean by overland and sea routes, and was thus open to external linguistic and religious influence. This is his conclusion, so I'll stop here and thank you for your attention.